This is Vibrant Spaces, a show about placemaking, activating, and connecting city spaces for the communities you serve.
Hey everyone, welcome to the third episode of our Vibrant Spaces podcast. My name is Tim Souza, head of community activation here at Story City. And with me today is my amazing co-host, Emily Craven, our CEO.
G'day, mate.
Today's podcast episode is all about creativity as a mindset within the city. How do we take creativity and imbue it within all of the aspects of what cities are doing in regards to placemaking and creating a space that people want to live in that's beautifully aesthetic and takes into consideration their ability to go about their daily life and enjoy an aesthetically pleasing journey in the city that they like to dwell in and not look at ugly signs and not see things.
I would say creativity in surprising places people don't expect creativity to be in a city.
Fair. And basically how people can interact with an entity like a city as a singular entity rather than a variety of departments that see themselves as separate entities. I think it'll be a really fun conversation.
Yeah. Can I give you a case study of a city that does creativity in a weird place?
Sure. I mean, case studies are your thing. So what do you got for us today?
In the city of Calgary, several years back, there was a young man by the name of Andrew S01 who started his own oddball division of the mobility department. So we're talking mobility, transit lanes, bike lanes, et cetera, all very infrastructure based stuff, like good design, but not necessarily considered like massively creative. Andrew decided, particularly during the pandemic, that some things needed to change to be able to innovatively address the unique challenges of the pandemic. And so he got the go-ahead from his manager to create this little oddball division that looked at how do you merge mobility with need, particularly around expanding. And so the city of Calgary has, like a lot of North American cities in very Arctic areas that get like snow for 6 months of the year. They're a very car-driven city. Edmonton is a very car-driven city. They're 3 hours north of Calgary. Calgary is a very car-driven city. So a lot of very wide lanes, double lane roads, which are not the best for vibrancy. Walkability is generally what increases vibrancy in areas, but we have a lot of roads that people drive in Calgary. And so during the pandemic, when they needed more space and they wanted to try and support all of those different restaurants and those sorts of things, they did what many cities did, and they borrowed an external lane from each side of the road to build out patios so that people could eat outside, not share germs, etc. Right? You've seen that happen in a bunch of different cities. But what the city of Calgary did that was really interesting is that Andrew bought 60 concrete bollards. When I say bollards, do you know what that means?
Isn't that like cement thing that blocks off traffic sometimes?
Yeah, like in construction zones where they're like cordoning off the construction area, they're like the little cement.
The little barriers. There's a barrier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he bought 60 concrete bollards and he contacted the local mural festival and he got local muralists to decorate those bollards. And then they used those to cordon off the patios, right? Those patios were so popular that they now run them every summer, regardless of the fact of whether or not it's a pandemic. But each year, what Andrew does, if he doesn't reuse the bollards, he buys 60 new bollards and gives the mural festival and the artists to paint those bollards. And so he's been doing that now for 3 or 4 years. They now have several hundred of these bollards, which then get used across the city for various things. Does a department need something to cordon off a new construction area? They borrow these beautified bollards that they then put up that then beautifies that construction area, but also keeps it safe. They need to block off an area because a car did a stupid thing and drove down a pedestrian street. They use those bollards to do that, right? And so now those bollards are borrowed by so many departments across the city of Calgary. And each year he just gets a budget. He gets a bunch of new ones. And so these bollards are appearing all across the city in parks, and rec use them for temporary seating. And so this tiny little project taking creativity and mobility lane and putting that in there has then evolved into this very useful thing that all of the city can use that makes things more beautiful, that's movable because they're transportable, right? And so they had this beautiful expanding program that built over time.
It's interesting because those would be needed anyway. And it sounds like it's transitioning that concrete jungle into something that's a
Correct.
concrete play place.
Exactly. And then Calgary has this history of leveraging like local creators, whether it's to tell a visual story. So we actually launched stories.
I was about to say that. Isn't Calgary one of our cities that we just gone live with a bunch of
particularly for this summer. Yeah. So we worked with the city of Calgary to do a community engagement process where they wanted writers and musicians and visual artists and actors from across the city to tell stories that activated downtown. And so we have 4 choose your own adventures. We have a choose your own adventure through Chinatown where these mysterious magical doors appear. You have a story where this kind of shadowy underworld is encroaching on the real world and you're trying to save Calgary. There's another one that involves a mad scientist where you're also trying to save Calgary. There's another one that's a dating sim where you're given 3 suitors and you can go on these different dates around the city. And so it takes you to all of these different dating locations. But
is it for me to go on a date or is it like for me to go alone and experience am I a voyeur or am I taking someone on?
Okay. So, but you are a character in the story, right? So this isn't just necessarily like date suggestion. Although that's what it ends up doubling as, like date suggestions, because you could so there's like a fictional character that you're dating. So there's like a hot yoga dad. There's someone who's like an old friend that you rekindle your love with. And so you can go on these different dates with these different people. You could obviously, like in the real world, bring an actual person on it as a legitimate date because it visits different areas, but it like doubles as a tourism thing as well. So it's for locals to explore their area, like they're fictional. There's multiple different endings. So you could do it again and again. And a lot of people do, like we get 40% repeat visitation from this kind of stories, but it doubles for tourism and it doubles for locals to be able to explore an area. It's available 24/7, but it uses gamification, it uses story, and it uses local creators to make it because it's the locals that really know their city. They know all the little interesting, tiny, like history tidbits and interesting places to visit and like hidden artworks and all of those kind of things. And so all of those get molded into a story and they might end up referencing those, bollards that they see on the side of the road. And so I think what I really love about the city of Calgary is it looks at like, where can we use creativity to activate infrastructure? And we want to use our local people to do it, right? It doesn't just come from inside city. We acknowledge that our residents live in the city and they need to make things.
It helps Calgary tell a very vibrant story in that way. Kind of just like our guests. You want to give us first
Hand of City round 2.
Oh. Yeah.
So we have 2 wonderful guests on today. We have Melissa Kozakiewicz, who is the Deputy City Manager for Kansas City. So with oversight of a substantial $2.4 billion budget with a direction of 4,000 municipal employees, she brings a wealth of experience to her role. Prior to her current position, Melissa held the title of Deputy Business Administrator for the City of Jersey City, showcasing her proficiency in municipal management. And in both Kansas City and Jersey City, Melissa has really championed the concept of the utility of creativity. So she infuses artistry intentionally in all aspects of the municipal initiatives and operations. And her dedication to innovation and forward-thinking approaches has really led her to serve as the director of innovation for Jersey City. That was also one of her prior positions where she demonstrated a commitment to fostering progressive solutions. And so Melissa's broad expertise is further evidenced by her previous roles as a professor for public policy and the editor of the Jersey City Independent, highlighting her deep understanding of community engagement and communication. And she has this real passion for driving positive change and enhancing quality of life for residents. And she continues to be a really, I think, influential figure in municipal governance and really shaping the future of cities, I felt, through very visionary leadership.
So visionary that she brought Jared Horman, the creative director of Kansas City, our second guest today, who brings a blend of this design and creativity into the city's communication and not just communication department, but the initiatives of all the departments within the city, which is super cool. With a BFA in graphic design from Missouri State and a background in graphic design, marketing, and freelancing, Jared has really worked to enhance Kansas City's visual identity via social media, storytelling, and even the creation of something like the new city flag and logo. He started his career as a full-time graphic designer for Pi Kappa Phi Fraternity HQ. And then later, he served as the director of marketing and communications at Farmhouse Fraternity. His freelance work and volunteer roles for local fundraising events in Kansas City really honed and expanded his creative skills. My favorite part is that Jared is super creative and has this ability to do creative placemaking he envisions the way that spaces inspire community and engagement. His vision for Kansas City involves celebrating its rich cultural, artistic expression through public art, through parks, through innovative wayfinding systems. And so he truly believes that fostering placemaking in the city will drive community via joy and also drive economic growth. So navigating all of these complexities of municipal government, Jared has actively admit that he's never been involved in government before, but his perseverance has led to some very notable achievements, including designing a new wayfinding system in the city and honing in a public aesthetic so that the community can see the city entity as a singular body. He holds a firm belief that creativity inspires joy and reflection and encourages collaborative community building in every aspect of what he does.
And I think that's how I would describe this particular podcast. Joyful. Everything they do is joyful and aimed at joy. And if every city in the world was like, does this bring joy? If they asked that in their department, I feel like we would have maybe on our way to a utopia, Tim.
Really would. Although I will note that this joy does come at the end of some desk kicking. So without further ado, let us jump in to talk to these two amazing people.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Jared, for joining us.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Happy to be here.
We're excited to have you guys with us today.
All the way from Kansas City, we have heard some wonderful and interesting innovations and examples out of Kansas City from your other colleagues in different departments around the city. But we're really excited today to chat to you about what you are doing within the city itself, how you are changing hearts and minds with your unique brand of creativity and muscle. And I'll let people guess who the muscle is in this relationship. I'll be curious. Maybe we'll put those in the comments. But first off, I wanted to ask Jared, what was it like for you growing up in Kansas City as an artist, right? What has been the biggest change that you have witnessed in the community that you grew up in?
Yeah, Kansas City historically has always been a city that has supported artists. It's the headquarters of Hallmark is here, and there's a lot of folks that come here, find a role in a bigger creative space, and then decide to call this home and plant roots. So there's a lot of entrepreneurship that's led through arts in the area. And so growing up around that, there was always artists doing very cool things. And I remember I actually grew up in a small town outside of Kansas City, but Kansas City was the core artist inspiration for me. And so when I would come here, seeing the work that folks were doing is what inspired me that, hey, I could actually consider doing this for a full-time career. So that initial impact definitely shaped my trajectory to become an artist, to study in Missouri, and to follow the footsteps of folks that had continued to shape Kansas City as a place that artists thrive.
So you were carrying that banner, that legacy banner of art forward in a really crazy way. And I'm so excited to get into it. But before we do, Melissa, you've moved to Kansas City from New Jersey, and from Jersey City specifically. That change had to be a fascinating one. What place/location in Kansas City is the most special to you since moving there, and why?
So it was quite a transition. Thank you for acknowledging that. I'm still dealing with it 3 years in. Lifelong New Yorker, living in Kansas City has been amazing and wild. And I will say, when I first moved here, I cried every day for the first 3 months because the grass was so green and the sky was so blue. And so I don't know if there's a particular place that I can pinpoint, but the energy and the vibe of just living in an area that there is green grass and blue sky all around, and also major metropolitan lifestyle, is staggering. And I definitely missed it the first few years of my life, but I'm here now, so I'm having a great time.
Do you feel that's like adding years back to your life?
100%.
100%.
Yes,
Yeah,
for
so,
sure.
so there's your favorite part. Melissa gets to be around more. We love that.
Yeah.
So if we had, I guess the last question I want to ask the both of you as we get started here is, if you had a giant billboard with you where you could put metaphorically anything on it, anywhere in the city or on the planet, what message would you want to leave? I'm sure there's something specific.
So I think for me, and this I think also ties into the work that we do and maybe some of our process, is that I probably wanted to just say perfection is the enemy of excellence. And I think that really comes into play, that a lot of the projects we're doing, a lot of the new things we're trying to start and trying to launch, folks are there's questions of, cool, can you build all of this process and build the 15, 20-year plan? And right now, we're not trying to build the perfect plan. We're trying to do the cool thing and get it out there. And then we'll continue to pilot it and figure out what the solution is in the long run. And we don't really want the request to have the perfect solution to prevent us from being able to move forward.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm going to give you one that I have, and then one that Jared gave me. You probably don't remember this, but it was a couple weeks ago. So the one that I always go to whenever I need something to, like, for a greeting card, or like when you're at somebody's wedding and you have to write, I always write, there is no moment other than this one, because there is no moment other than this one. And if it goes with everything that kind of Jared and I are working so hard on, it's like, who else but us, right? This is the moment. We are the people. There is no moment other than this one. So that's what I would put. But the one that Jared gave me was about joy.
Okay.
So you tell it. Can you tell it?
Which?
I think I said I was frustrated, I think, and we were trying to come up with something. And I think I said something like, there's no spectacle in joy. Did I say something like that? And joy is...
I think I said something like, joy is a valid emotion as well. Something along the lines of, joy in art, joy in creativity, joy in our work is equally as valid as pain and suffering and the things that folks also work through with art. But also, art can just bring joy, and that can be enough. And that is a completely valid and important experience to share with the world.
I love that 100%. That's how I view art and stories. But also, I think how a lot of people, when they think about vibrancy, they're thinking about solving the problem, and they don't think to themselves, maybe just by providing people a little bit of joy, it makes that ability to solve a problem that much easier, and that much easier to take that on. And I love asking this question. I love it that we ask this question about billboards, because it really sets the vibe for who we are talking to today. Like, this just sets the perfect vibe for the work that you're doing, because it's super innovative what you have been building in Kansas City. Like, you have been essentially trying to pull the city together in a creative collaboration and this kind of unique aesthetic through not only creativity but codes, right? Like policy and not just through those dollars. I know this has a couple of unique components. We have this top-down approach and change from Melissa as the deputy city manager, and then Jared as that kind of transformational city professional who kind of advocates for that innovation. So Melissa, how have you leveraged your position as the deputy city manager to, I want to say, kick up dust, to build this impressive kind of cultural, structural shift? And how did you end up bringing Jared, who is a self-confessed just artist, into the mix?
I think part of the reason that I came to Kansas City, or was invited to come to Kansas City, was because of my experience in communication in general. And there was a real disparate approach before I got here. Pretty much everybody was just doing whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, and there wasn't any real vision or direction. So I realized pretty quickly that I needed to unify the vision of what city communications could be, or what I wanted it to be, or what would add value to the residents here. And in thinking about how to reshape it and creating a unified vision and articulating what things are Kansas City and what are not, Kansas City Chiefs being one, but also indoor outdoor lifestyle, right? There's certain things that Kansas City just is comfortable with and is just a part of Kansas City's identity. Blue sky, green grass, that's another one. So anyway, just really looking at and understanding who Kansas City is and then building a communication strategy around it. So that was where my starting place was. And then when I realized that I can do words and systems, but I'm not a visual artist, and my visual aesthetic isn't built on, I can't project like, how do I imagine something will look? I can't really do that really well. So I knew I needed a partner who could be that creative, inspirational, collaborator, muse, all of those things. And I didn't actually mean to hire Jared to be the creative director. I meant to hire him to be the lead designer. But it happened very quickly that I understood how much value the creativity and vision was going to be towards creating a new environment for how cities can communicate with their residents and beyond. And so I just pushed Jared into a role that he didn't necessarily know what it was. And now we're sitting here talking to you guys.
That's beautiful. And I think that I love that dynamic where you both just laugh, because there's obviously, I'm sure there was a lot of conversations around that. But I think I'm going to put Melissa on the spot, and maybe Jared, this is fun for you to hear. Why Jared specifically? As you identified this person who was going to fill these gaps, why Jared?
I have to just be honest, okay? So if this comes out in a way that seems harsh, I'm just going to just say
Roll with it. Go for it.
I'm difficult to work with. I come from a place that's very aggressive, and I'm, like I said, lifelong New Yorker. We communicate differently, and so I know that I'm difficult to work with. But I also have great faith in my own ability to imagine change and see beauty. And so when I knew that I had to find somebody that could have a shared vision and shared technique and he had to be the person. It happened to be he, but could have been anybody. Had to be somebody that was going to be able to work with me and able to see through my exterior to understand that we can create beautiful things together. And Jared immediately did that. What I loved about Jared the very first time I met him in an interview was, I don't know what I asked him. Maybe it was something like yours. If we were going to build a Welcome to Kansas City sign, what would it look like? And Jared was like, is it okay if I disrupt the skyline? And I was like, you are hired. The question is enough. Yeah. So he shared the big picture, and I knew that he was going to be able to, we were able to work together. He was able to work with me. And yeah, he was beautiful and talented and amazing and articulate and all the things that you need in your closest collaborator.
I love that so much. And I think that what I love most about the relationship between the two of you is that I think that not only do you pair well off each other, and we've heard from other Kansas Cityans that Jared is the nicest, most diplomatic human being. I feel that there is a wonderful pairing that goes on there. But I think that what I love about the process between you attempting to do in the city is that you're basically adding a creative element to everything that the city does, not just in its communication, but just in everything that involves any sort of design or setting an identity, right? That's what I really love. And so how does your process work? How do you identify what rooms you need to bring in Jared to that table?
Practically speaking, if I was going to write it out, I think I would say any public facing aesthetic. So that's every way that we communicate. It should be intentional and deliberate, and it should be aware of the details. It should always be directed towards the person who is experiencing it. And I think that's the value of bringing Jared and beauty and creativity to really any public facing anything, because if people are going to be interacting with it, and this is wayfinding signs in the community, the way we wrap the streetcar, how do our fleet experience, what is their experience in the world, and what do people think when they see the street sweeper that Jared designed to look like a little blue monster? Everything. It's just everything that people have, that we put out into the world, or every part of our infrastructure that we create, we should do it with the intention of great design.
I love that. And I imagine that there are a lot of policies that you then take a look at where you've shoved Jared into a room, you've closed a door, you've been like sorted out, and you realize that it's like policies that are essentially in the way of being able to smooth out these lines of communication. Can you talk a little bit about how you look at those policies and attempt to make uniform changes in that regard?
Yeah, that's a good thing about bureaucracy, right? There's a policy for everything except surveys. We need a survey. Too many people are doing too many surveys. But we can utilize the policies that we have to ensure that we're creating something special every time. And some of these exist already in cities across America. 1% for the arts is one that people know about, right? But yes, and if you don't have 1% for the arts, any city who doesn't have it, you advocate for it, and advocate not just for 1% for the arts on your buildings, advocate 1% for the arts as part of a parks or an open space tax, so that you have a regular piece of revenue, not just when you're building infrastructure. But that aside, there are lots of policies. Even how do we repave roads, or how do we create bike lanes? This is a battle I've been having for maybe a year now. Not a battle, but I tell them I want the person on the bike lane. Can you picture a bike lane and there's like a little person on a bike with a helmet on, indicating that it's a bike lane? So I want them to alternate it with a person with a ponytail, which we did in Jersey City, right? So it's a regular person with no hair, a person with a ponytail, person with no hair, person with a ponytail. And so even there, I can add that to the policy. When you're creating roadway markings for bike lanes, they have to have this. Or I don't even need to be that prescriptive, because now that I have created a creative director, I can say all signage needs to be approved by the creative director. And then Jared will do it.
I think that's a great segue. Jared, you had mentioned before that you really hold this like UX role, really focused on that user's experience in whether or not their ponytail is represented in a bike lane, as an example. What has that been like for you, building that UX? And how do you have those conversations in planning with the transit authority? Like, how do you build that? How do you have those conversations? I'm very curious.
Totally. So I think the first thing is important that Melissa gets me in the room so that I'm there to have the conversations. Once that happens, it's reminding everyone to ask the question, cool, how is a resident going to experience this? Is that sign going in the right place? Is that too much information and they're just going to move over this? How is this going to continue to build folks' affinity to their joy in living in Kansas City? So they want to live here, they want to raise their families here, they want to invite their friends here. It's asking all of those questions, from the tiny little notice that your sidewalk is going to get redone this week to bigger things like wayfinding, murals, and bigger infrastructure projects. It's just asking the question, are we thinking about how a large group of people are going to experience this, how an individual, how a mom pushing a stroller, are we considering all of these people? And pushing folks to keep doing that is across the board starting to be a question that more people are thinking about.
And I think I remember when I was in to name tag New York City, like I was always impressed by the little details that I saw in different places. And so it sounds like you are actively looking to do that in Kansas City. You're wanting to make sure that not only is there a cohesive visual brand across everything from infrastructure to communications, but you're also making sure that those tiny little details, and I think, as you guys said at the very start, bring joy. This creation and this creativity and this communication needs to bring joy and identity.
100%. I think I have about 6 designers that work on my team with me. And that's a thing that we talk about all the time of, cool, okay, we're sending out this magnet, we're rolling out recycling carts, and we're including this in it. How can we make sure that this is like a piece, even though it's a small detail, that like people are excited to put on their fridge, that they're like, hey, this is cool, this looks good, this fits with the rest of the aesthetic, and this makes me maybe want to recycle or at least think about it. And it's actually been that was about a year ago, and the number of times that people have been like, oh yeah, I have this recycling magnet, I liked it, who designed it? I'm like, hey, I did that. But it's just a little thing that, as a part of a bigger package, a bigger rollout with it, that really continues to help build affinity for the things that we're doing.
And change is very difficult. People like to do things that they've done before. They like to be comfortable. How do you address that, Jared, as you go through the space and you have a resistant director? I know you've been here for about 1.5 years now, so you probably have, and we've heard from other people in the city that you are an amazing diplomat and can connect with just about anybody, which is awesome. So, but how do you do it? How do you convince let's go with the buses that you mentioned in that experience. How do you go to the transit authority and say, we're doing this, it needs to be pretty, we want people to see our buses and think fun and not, ugh. So how do you get from the way things are done to the way that you're envisioning this kind of...
Get from the no to the yes.
Yeah, the no to the yes to this aesthetic that you're building. Like, how have you done that?
Drag them kicking and screaming, maybe? I don't know.
Yes, definitely kicking and screaming a little bit. So a big first step was establishing a really comprehensive brand guidelines. When I started, there had been the start of the conversation about a brand refresh and finishing that process and then creating a very comprehensive document that we can share to be like, hey, here's the standard. Here's what it is. There isn't room for debate around these concrete things. And then it is going to Streetcar Authority or whoever I'm working with and trying to understand what their actual goal is here. What is their need? What is the goal that they're trying to accomplish? Or what is our goal? And then showing them the best way to do that using the brand. A lot of folks, once you get them to understand why their thing doesn't work, will come on board as well. There is a diplomatic push and pull. And there also is sometimes that I do need to call in the muscle to go ahead and say, hey, this is what it's going to be. One particular thing that was a fun kind of journey on that was Iris. We launched our own local municipal ride share, make it easier for folks to get around as we're navigating things with the buses. And there was a bunch of different ideas that folks had, and we were able to come in and be like, okay, so this needs to be cool, it needs to be accessible, it needs to feel like something that folks would think about in the same vein of Uber and Lyft, but also knowing that it functions a little bit differently and also needs to feel like Kansas City. And we put our heads together and we're able to come up with, hey, the Kansas City flag is called Iris. It has RS, which is rideshare. What if we were to go ahead and celebrate this, or the Kansas City flower, is the iris. And it isn't necessarily super well known. So let's bring that back to the forefront, do some beautiful purple wraps, build a whole brand around that.
And you mentioned bringing in the muscle. Melissa, can you maybe lean into a little bit of what that's like for you, leveraging your role to make sure that you're creating the space for Jared to do these beautiful purple wraps? And
oh my God. Thank you for asking. I said to Jared 2 nights ago, I don't care, Jared. I don't care if they don't like you, Jared, because they don't like me either. And it's not really true that they don't like me or him. Everybody likes him. But I will say that there is a part of me that has to say, I don't care if you like me. You can't do that insane thing. So if you don't like it, I'm so sorry. I hired a person whose job is to do the creative work. You are in the finance department. You cannot create a fountain out of money. No, it's a terrible aesthetic. It doesn't take our finance department seriously. It doesn't take our understanding of taxpayer dollars seriously. No, you guys are wrong. I'm sorry if you don't like it. I feel a deep responsibility to the taxpayer all the time. And I feel it is our responsibility to use the dollars because nobody wants to pay taxes. I hate paying taxes. I hate how many taxes I have to pay in the city of Kansas City. But if I got to pay them, then I want to know that they're being used in a way that makes sense. And so if that means that I have to be the bad guy that says, no, you are not doing that thing because you are using taxpayer dollars to pay for it, and it's ridiculous, then okay, I'll take it. My neighbors like it when I don't waste their money. It's one of those things that I have to be okay with people not liking the decisions that I make, as long as I'm doing the right thing and always thinking about the taxpayer who's helping me to do the right thing.
Yeah, it sounds the reason why this is slowly working and slowly and bringing that change in, because as with city governments, all things are slow. I know that it's probably slower than you ever want it to be, but it sounds like you're basically like, I will kill a project. I will kill this project if you do not let Jared in the door. And I think that
100%.
Yeah. And so I think that being able to do that change, you need the muscle at the top to be able to make sure that happens. Right. Mm-hmm. But then you also need to structure things in a way that change then becomes systemic and it lasts beyond when Melissa moves on, beyond when Jared moves on. And I think that this is the first time I've ever seen a creative director role in a city.
Yeah.
And you said that innovation happened by accident, but it feels very strategic, Melissa.
Look, it's almost like when people say that they're successful because they've worked hard. You're successful because you worked hard and because you were lucky. And so being able to be flexible, if I didn't meet Jared, would we have a creative director? I don't know. I created that role because I knew that I really feel like, especially in government, but in everywhere, in every major entity, there's a job for everybody. Everybody has a place. Think of the person at Walmart who's greeting you on the way in. There's a job for everybody. And so I really try to find the person's wheelhouse and then create the role around them. Well, HR loves me for that. They love that. But so Jared, I don't know if other cities have a creative director, but I knew that Jared's skill set and his creative skill set and his ability to communicate with people and my ability to support everything he does every time would allow him to really create a unified aesthetic for the entire city. And I knew that he was going to be able to sell it too. So like, I can codify it, I can create it, I can make the job, but also like people need to look at the work when it's done and be like, oh, Jared's amazing. And they do, they always do. So he never lets down his end of the bargain either.
You've transferred the authority in a way there.
Yeah.
But it couldn't work if Jared was not excellent and Melissa was not the muscle. And I think that it's beautiful that you acknowledge that, but I also want to acknowledge the fact that you have also then built something that I feel will last beyond when you guys finally determine that you do want to move on and another city snakes the both of you. And
yeah, we set a standard, right? So anytime you raise the bar is now raised.
Exactly. And I think that it sounds like, Jared, you are the true innovation in Kansas City. It's great to have you on today. And I think that as a part of that, you'd mentioned previously, you were talked a little bit about getting these brand guidelines set up for the city. I would like to dive maybe a little bit deeper into that, because we may not all be able to clone a Jared, but we might be able to replicate a little bit of what you've been able to do through those brand guidelines. And so can you help us understand why you identified that you needed them in the first place? You had mentioned that you came in and people were doing all kinds of crazy things that weren't associated with local history or local iconography that is valuable to Kansas City. And so did you identify what you needed? How did you take what you have and then basically hone in and take this complex environment of multiple departments doing crazy money fountains and pointing them all in a singular direction? Like, how did that process work from beginning to end, if you don't mind, like letting us see inside your brilliant brain that Melissa hired?
For sure. So first off, I'm going to say that I am not the point person on innovation. That is absolutely Melissa. I want to make sure that is very clear.
I saw the discomfort in your face there. Let us praise you.
He's amazing.
And our relationship is why this is able to happen, because we're lock in step. And I know that Melissa has given me what her perspective is, and I know when I'm acting on her behalf, and so I have the capacity to move forward. Specifically with brand guidelines, I came in and there wasn't a consistent font. I looked at about 10 different materials across departments, and I couldn't tell that any of them were the city of Kansas City. I was out in the city and was learning what the city does, and realized most of the projects we were working on, I had no idea that was the city. Really across the board, the cool things the city was doing and is doing, I didn't know as a resident that's lived here for a very long time and a person that loves the city. And so it really was showing that to departments, hey, here's what yours looks like, here's what this looks like, here's what this looks like. This all has to come together. And then for me, having experience building brand guidelines in the past that were a little bit more loosey-goosey because they were for smaller nonprofits and they weren't as comprehensive, they didn't have as big of a scope for those brands. So I had some experience of kind of diving into how to craft these details, and then looking at the city, seeing just how big of a scope of work that they do, and realizing just how many projects are going on is why we just had to start going through, okay, cool. Apparel, great. Here's what our standard is for apparel. Direct mail, here's our baseline standard. And it's just really going through and then checking, having folks on my team that are in every department so I can say, cool, can you all bring me your brochures this week? What exists out there in the ecosystem right now? Cool. So here's the breadth of kind of the content that we're putting out there. Here's what the information generally looks like. Now let's tighten that and figure out some baseline templates that we can start with, knowing that there still is going to be a creativity that designers bring to showcase whatever that specific thing is, that it brings joy, and that also Our logo looks consistent across the board, and people look at this and they know this is a document from Kansas City.
And it being such a large beast that a city is, like, and you have, I believe it's 35 people under you, but even those 35 people couldn't touch every single project. So you'd need some way of being able to handle just the mass in general. And I suppose that's what those brand guidelines really help with.
100%. And also, it's definitely an ongoing and living process. There's always going to be new things that come up, and we're like, great, okay, we have a brand guideline. We have a base of what's happening before. This is a new problem. How do we apply that to the brand guidelines? And then how do we update the brand guidelines so this is happening consistently in the future?
I think that's awesome. And so then can I ask, what are some of the projects you've been able to complete leveraging this innovative model of the two of you and this new guideline bias towards beautification user experience? What have you been able to do? What have been the results so far? I know that you mentioned a couple things in our last conversation. I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Maybe we can both pick a favorite.
Okay.
I think right now what we're working on, and I've done this in another city also, was composting. So this is both of Jared's wheelhouse, right? Because composting isn't just about waste diversion, right? Although it is, right? But what it really, if you think about the user experience and how do people live their lives, and this is also, I think maybe we're always trying to make it easy. Think about how people live. How do your parents live? How do your grandparents live? How do you live? Are you going to do that thing? You're not going to, if you don't have a place to put your kitchen scraps, you're not going to compost, right? Or if the place where you have to put it isn't and aesthetically what you want on your countertop, then you're not going to put it on your countertop. So so thinking about composting and how do we think about it through the lens of sorting, right? Just like we sort our recyclables if we don't live in a single stream community, which thank God we don't here in Kansas City, but that makes it even harder when you do. But if you already have a culture of sorting recycling out, then you just have to create another space or place physically in your house. How do you create that sorting environment and then making it bigger? What about when you go to the Kansas City Current game? Do they have a place where things can be composted? What about when you are in our parks? What about all of the things? How do we add that user and human behavior element to the aesthetic? Then I also do not want, I want all of the branding around the composting work on the bucket, at the drop-off spots, whatever. It all has to look the same so that people know what to do every time they go there. It has to be easy. It can't be like, in this place, I got to put my compost in a bag, but if I go to this place, I don't need to put it in a bag. And this place, there's a number that I got to punch in. No, it has to be easy. It has to be beautiful. It has to be streamlined, and it has to be the way you would do it too. If it's not a thing that you would do, then no one's going to do it. It has to be easy to fit into your life, and it's our job to make it easy. So in my mind, composting is the thing we're working on right now, having great success with. We can send over some of the stuff if you want to show it. We're having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, and even in that one, so there's different vendors that are handling different elements of our composting program that even is in different departments. And so it's been a big part of our creative role to ensure that to the residents, that's all one program. It does, to them, they don't care who is handling that. They just know that the city is doing composting and figuring out what our brand for composting is, and then ensuring that's consistent across the board, regardless of who we're working with, to ensure that is a big part of my creative responsibility and building our own visual ecosystem, iconography, et cetera, that doesn't feel widely inconsistent also with how folks experience composting in the rest of the world.
It feels like compost franchising in a way. They're making that consistent brand, different people. But
we're happy to be service composting consultants if you guys are looking for one.
And that makes sense because people, when they look at the city, they think it's just the city. They don't see all the departments. They don't see the divisions. They see a single entity. And so what you guys are doing is you're just wrapping, as those compost consultants, the same brand around the whole city, saying, we compost. It doesn't matter who it is, we are doing it. And I think that's brilliant.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
We do it.
Right.
This is such a big part of your job. It has to be.
It is.
Initiatives, if Public Works is doing it, and also Office of Sustainability is doing it, but they have two different, sustainability is doing it over here and Public Works is doing it over here. They believe that there are two different programs. They do not have two different programs. So that's, Jared often has to tell people, look, you're sitting at this composting table. It's one initiative. It's not the public works part or the sustainability part. It's all one table.
And I think going back to your comment on cost savings, that's a huge cost savings for the taxpayer as well, because then both parties are contributing to a singular piece rather than running two separate campaigns with two separate marketing materials and copy and all of the effort that goes into it and time that gets wasted. It's a singular push.
And I think it intersects, with so much with my role is helping our departments and our folks just understand that, like, this is just a Kansas City initiative. Yes, I know that you're in this department, and internally we have departments, but as we present stuff to residents, they're not super concerned with which department is handling this. They just need to know that it's Kansas City. And from a user experience, the less information we make them process, the better and the faster and the easier they'll be able to work with the thing that we're creating.
I think that's a great segue into that. You guys have been doing work to help your departments understand this. And I loved what you were telling me about how you were able to get employees on the bandwagon of this innovative change, leveraging the solar eclipse. Could you talk a little bit about how initiatives like that are inside the city departments are helping create that advocacy?
You want to start?
I think you got it.
The solar eclipse was so fun. We knew there was a solar eclipse because somebody said, hey, is the city doing anything for it? And we thought, okay, yeah, sure. So we made glasses for every employee. We have 4,500 employees. They're not that expensive, right? The total, what if they were $1 a pair, it's less than $5,000. And it created such a beautiful moment for everybody, and also a wonderful branding opportunity for us so that we could create this on-brand piece of merchandise. It's not merchandise, but this on-brand piece of giveaway swag that was relevant to the moment. And it just reinforces this is what the aesthetic is. We did the same thing with the corporate challenge. There was they do t-shirts for all the employees who are participating. And we intervened there too. We find a way to make something that's already happening or existing in the world and make it on brand, fun, and really cool.
I love that so much. And I think that it really showed how, again, you create that change for the long term. Yes, you have someone who is throwing somebody into rooms and strong-arming them, and then you have other people who are very diplomatically explaining how this is the better way. But then you also have these moments that just get everyone on board, and they get everyone on board with joy, which I don't think a lot of cities feel that within their departments, that things are joyful and creative, and it just makes everybody more interested to come to work. And I will occasionally say to Tim, I was like, oh, so-and-so is wasted on city government. I want to steal them for XYZ startup thing. But we need that. We need that within our cities. We need those people within our cities to be able to make that change and to be the doers. And so I think that what I am most excited to see is how you're taking this systemization and this bringing of joy and creativity into all of the different departments, and how you're planning to use this new kind of creative capacity via Jared's role and his team to support or showcase the city in the lead up and during the big events of 2026. So the FIFA World Cup, the 250th anniversary of the States. How are you planning to utilize this new creative capacity to really show off the city?
I think it's important for Jared to share with you the reason why he believes that the external aesthetic in the world is important. So why does the brand matter? Why does it matter people's experience with the brand?
Yeah. I mean, from a general branding standpoint, a consistent brand builds trust and builds affinity. And for example, you can say Nike, if you like Nike, you see the swoosh, you like it, you're going to like this, the way that this thing works. Similarly, when we're using the brand consistently, it starts to build that affinity. And when you have that affinity, then you can start to leverage that in a direction that really opens up more creative storytelling, because folks are already bought into what the brand is, what it looks like. And they're like, great. So these are the colors, these are the fonts. And Kansas City is a place that's fun. It's got great food. It's got art. It's got sports. It's got so many things. And how are we using those to continue to tell what the fun story of Kansas City is. And so really getting departments on board, continuing to build up our team is ramping us up to be able to capitalize when everyone is here so that we're able to be seen on even a larger scale. So part of our brand has been tightening us to just being Kansas City and calling ourselves Kansas City because that's what we want the world to know us, as opposed to necessarily like calling it Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas. The region is Kansas City. And that's the story that we're telling and that we want folks to remember when they come to Kansas City. And so getting us on board and getting us ready and having all of those fun, beautiful little moments that we've built out in the few years that I've worked for the city is prepping us for those folks and even beyond as Kansas City continues to explode after the world sees how incredible we are.
And are there areas that you have identified in the city where you're like, I want to make sure that we revamp this area, bring more vibrancy to blank XYZ areas so that you, over the next 18 months, do you have like goals of different places and different, whether it's city department areas, whether it's physical areas within the city that you really want to focus on making them, or either to bring them up to a standard or making them shine on?
Yes, so I'm going to build a bridge here because we keep saying city departments, but really what we mean is when we say public works, we mean when you are walking down the street, that's public works, right? The sidewalks are public works. The streets are public works. The street signs are public works. When there's and parks are us, right? So like when you're walking around in the world, you want your experience to be pleasant. And so when we're talking about building these things up between city departments, what we really mean is our wayfinding signs are all going to look the same and they're all going to look beautiful. I'm not going to have a different one in this neighborhood to this neighborhood. Like wayfinding signage is public works, and public works is going to do it the way that Jared wants him to do it. And he's going to hire some other designers because some of it, right, is external beyond all of the people that are already doing the day-to-day. If we're changing over all the wayfinding, we need somebody to do that. And we are. By the time FIFA gets here, we imagine the visitor experience, right? They get off the airport, which is ours. The airport, that department has to make sure that their aesthetic, the people know how to move through the airport, that the airport is clean, that the airport is fun and surprising in some ways, right? And then they drive down the road and they go now they're on our streets, and our streets need to be clean. Our signage needs to be uniform. It needs to be what you would expect if you were going to create it like in your head, right? If you're on The Sims, you're not going to start making all these chaotic decisions. You're going to make it in a way that makes sense. And I think that's what we're really trying to do all the time. Make it make sense. Everything we touch should make sense and it should be beautiful. And I think as we lead up to the World Cup, we don't have uniform wayfinding signage right now. We don't. We have some wayfinding in some parts of the city. And Jared had somebody take pictures of all of them so that we could look at all the differences at one point. And it's so crazy. There's no uniformity at all to it. And even though they're all coming from the city. So I think our touch is just a blanket of make it better before people get here, so that when they get here, and this is why we're doing it now, because we got some time and we had to build the brand first, and then we had to showcase what the brand can do, and then we had to interrupt projects and make sure that people understood if you don't do what Jared's wants you to do, or the way that Jared wants you to do it, we won't do it at all. And they're okay. But we had to do that first in order to get to the place where we are now, where like people ask Jared, hey, how do I get banners for my council district? Who do I have to talk to get whatever? Because now they know if you want to make it better and you want to make it beautiful, or if you're already making it better, right? A particular parks project we're working on right now, Barney Ellis Plaza, very big, incredible project. They went to Jared and they go, we have to block this off. How do you want us to do it? And then I was walking over there the other day and I called Jared, I'm going to FaceTime you. And I showed him these blockades, which have this wood panel over the top of it. I go, Jared, look what they did. Look what they did, Jared. Look what they did to your blockades. And he was like, you need to relax. They're coming. They know. This is temporary. Don't worry. And it's amazing to me that he said that, of course, always he's got it. But the fact that they did it right from the beginning without me even knowing about it means that we've made this impact. And this is something I saw out in the world. And I didn't have to say, please make sure that Jared knows, how are you going to wrap this block so that it looks nice instead of just being terrible? And they did it. And it's happening. And so I think when we're leading up to the World Cup, how do we want it to be? What do we expect? We just expect that these 2 years of every time we build a road, every time we make a project, every time we do anything, we are thinking about it in a way that's deliberate and intentional and looks better and more beautiful and is easier than it was before.
I think that is super brilliant, because what it does is, as all those people come in for FIFA, when they come back to the city, they know what to expect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because most likely what's going to be happening during FIFA is people will be popping around cities. And I believe Kansas City, in talking with the sports commission, is hosting one of the semifinals, right, of the event. So that means people will be coming to the city, coming back, and having that multiple touch point experience. And then they'll, hopefully, you guys have done such an amazing job, they want to come back and re-experience the city in a non-FIFA-sized event time, right? Which is thinking about that future of placemaking. So Melissa, I'm really curious. You've kicked up a lot of dirt since moving into Kansas City, it sounds. And in the past 5 years, I'm going to extend it a little bit. What new belief, behavior, habit do you believe has most improved life in Kansas City that has empowered both you and the people that you work with outside of Jared every day to make this change happen?
Oh, this is such a silly story. Garbage cans.
Go for it.
We in Kansas City did not have, when I pulled into Kansas City with my sister, we drove from the East Coast, pulled into, this is my new house. The neighbor comes over immediately, freaked me out. I'm from New York. We don't do that there. But anyway, the neighbor came over with this black box, and I looked at it and I ran in the house. And my sister said to her, "Oh, sorry, she's not from here. She doesn't know how to behave appropriately." But anyway, so the neighbor told my sister that it was the recycling bin, and it didn't have a top or anything. And my sister said, "Oh, thank you. We'll put it in the garage." So you just put your recycling in here? Yep. Okay. And then how do you do trash? And the lady said, "Oh, you have 2 bags and you just put them on just the 2 bags." And when my sister told me that, I was like, she has to be wrong. That can't be how they do trash in this city. There's no way. The raccoons are going to get in it. There's going to be recycling all over the neighborhood. That can't be the way they do it here. My sister has to be wrong. So I got my brave, friendly face together, and I went over to the neighbors. I said, "Thank you. Can you help me understand this?" And my sister was right. That was how they did it. And so now, how many years later? 3 years later, every resident of the city of Kansas City has a recycling bin with a top and a garbage bin with a top. And the recycling doesn't blow down your street, and the garbage isn't getting torn apart by raccoons. There's an economic benefit. Obviously, we had to pay money out up front, but the economic benefit is I don't have to clean up your garbage all over the neighborhood all day long with my new street sweeper that I had to buy, or whatever the case is, right? So that has been an incredible project to work on, and obviously worked on that design piece with Jared. But yeah, that's been a really great project that I feel has made an incredible impact on Kansas City. I'm sorry that the example is about garbage, but
it's okay. You're coming to Kansas City, taking out the trash. I love it. It's fantastic. It's perfect.
My neighbors have all thanked me for the trash cans, by the way.
I'm sure the rest of the city will now thank you after this podcast. You'll get letters in the mail being like, "Thank you so much. No more raccoon nets." We love it. So Jared, looking forward, because we've been talking a lot about moving forward, what are you looking forward to building as you lead Kansas City into this new future of creativity?
I think it's a couple of things. I think the direction of creative placemaking is absolutely one, and a project that Melissa and I are working heavily on already right now is how can we do some bigger murals? How can we do some bigger visual splashes, particularly in some areas that aren't heavily muraled already, but are where we have a lot of folks coming, a lot of folks working every day. How can we start to embed even more creativity in that? As with my background as a muralist, I'm super excited to bring some peers that I've made throughout country, world, as well as celebrate the local work of folks. I think that's a project that we're both super excited about in this moment. But I think also the other one that we keep talking about is the wayfinding we've started rolling out. And as we continue to do that, it's a project that I'm partnering with an artist to do wayfinding for each neighborhood, district, whatever the breakdown ends up being for that area. That allows there to be some sort of flavor that speaks to that neighborhood, and start finding artists, creatives that have a connection to that area specifically, so that there's something consistent there, as well as something specific that they can all feel ownership over.
I think I love that a lot, because that's a beautiful thing to end on, because a lot of what we've spoken about today has been that in-city change, that top-down approach, that kind of forcing change on people. But that really speaks to how you were very intentional about involving the community in placemaking, and how important that is to involve that community and those neighborhoods and the actual flavor, because yes, uniformity is important, but what is also important is celebrating the diversity in that city, and that you're able to make those components work together is amazing. We have come to the end of our interview. Sadly, I could talk to you guys for hours and hours, but
Can we rock the boat real quick? Can I rock the boat? Okay.
Go on.
One thing I want to say that you said earlier, and I wrote down, and I wanted to address it before we left you guys. Cities do not need a Melissa and a Jared in order to do the things that we're doing. All they need to do is to have somebody look around and say, I want to make this thing better. Just whatever it is, however it works in wherever you are. People just have to use the tools that they already have and then make that thing better. And as soon as they start doing that, it's contagious and it's fun and people start getting excited about it. And they don't have to do it the way that we do it. People can do it however they want to do it. Just be empowered to make things better. That's it.
I think that's a beautiful note to end on. So thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. And I can't wait to see what Kansas City does as you build better into the future. And I want to come visit. So Jared, let me know when this wayfinding project is done. I'll come be one of your first people to go through that user experience and give you some feedback. I think it'd be great.
Very happy to.
Yeah. So thank you guys for joining us today.
It's been a delight and a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Amazing talking to you guys.
Likewise.
Thanks for having us.
So much fun.
That was so phenomenal. I want the both of those people to be my best friends. I think I've decided they don't have a choice. I'm gonna go befriend them. However, I am still of the opinion that outside voices drive innovation, just like I was with Robin in Tampa. I know you love local, but like Melissa's voice is from outside of Kansas City. She developed her skill set. She got to, no offense to Jersey City, but she got to like really experiment and figure that out. And then she brought that experience. We talk about wanting all of the cities of the world to feel this way. She brought that in and she's duplicating it. She's making copies of what she does and she's improving it each time. So I think using her positional power as a muscle to make change in space in those rooms, bringing that outside culture with her to do so, and really leveraging that kind of top-down perspective is like what is making her effective and making her and Jared effective, because without her, Jared wouldn't have that muscle. And Jared is excellent at what he does, but I don't think it would have Melissa's strength behind it, because as they said in the Remember the Titans, attitude reflects leadership, Captain. So strategic use of this positional power, I think, is very important to this conversation, and something that I would love for cities to learn from is finding those good people, those good captains, to bring in that leadership and really, lack of better words, drive that change. I mean, she's noted that she has a master's of poetry, which is not public policy, but she's worked hard growing up as a city manager in Jersey City, and then brought her unique talents to Kansas City and is making that impact. I don't know how you feel, but that's how I'm fervently feeling at the moment.
Yeah, but she very specifically hired local intentionally, though, right? So she hired Jared, who was a respected local artist, to oversee the change and to place him as a director of communications. So she providing him with a team for execution and like forcing every city office to communicate about that structural change towards creativity. Like that role, hiring local, was intentional because she knew that she came in like a bat out of hell. Yeah. and that she could rub people the wrong way. And she needed a local, but she probably also needed a diplomat a little bit, is what she kind of talked about in the episode. Right. And, yeah, but I think it was, as you said, it's very strategic, right? It's very strategic. She strategically hired local. She strategically stepped on shoes and made Jared the good guy in her own words. And I think that it was very strategic in the fact that most public-facing things have to go through marketing for approvals, which means that they can stick their noses in things traditionally not considered to be design or creative.
That's true. They really don't stand for putting out crap. Like if a
It's
department
the
does it
only
wrong,
way. It's the only way it would work.
right? Well, Melissa openly said that she'll just make them go back and redo it. So then it really reinforces my point that it's that positional power, and it's bringing in someone who, quite honestly, is a New Yorker to a very kind Kansas City space to kick up some dirt and cause a mess. I will grant you, though, that she hired the best diplomat for the job, who can bridge the creative community and be that kind of inside-outside voice of, I know Kansas City, but not.
Yeah.
But I would say that's a positional thing that Melissa installed.
And it was smart creating that kind of like creative director role in marketing and communications, right? It was smart. And I think that, don't get me wrong, I understand that they are at the infancy of building those relationships, right? Of building those relationships, not only interdepartmentally to make sure that those departments are bringing them in, but also they're now in the infancy of starting to build the arts community and then connecting them to those city entities to do the things. Because like Jared's team is 35 humans, but the city is 4,000. Like 35 humans can't wrangle 4,000 all the time. And as we talk over and over again, like to get local buy-in, you want locals working on projects. And so that's why the city of Calgary has started repeatedly doing this. In our next episode, we'll see in the city of Baltimore, they're really starting to connect in artists to city and that sort of thing. So I think that, and they openly admit that Kansas City is at the infancy of those relationships, but they're public benefit focused, and they are on that right track to building that out. And at the end of this, they will have one city voice putting creativity at the start of every conversation. But this is a slow process. It's not quick.
That doesn't mean it's not worth implementing, though, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Like Calgary was slow too, because it took them multiple years in that Bollard project to build up those like visual creative assets. It's why when we've worked with cities, we've seen some of the better success in cities that have done projects across multiple years, because it's the building of assets and it's the building of expectation and it's the building of that identity in a visual way and those connections in a visual way and the expectations of those connections. That's what makes the impact. And I think that, again, that's where Mayor Lucas is a really great example of raising the bar and making sure that it's not just a pilot, it's a multiple layering of things.
Right. Well, and I think one of the values that they both talked about is that they're truly creating a choke point so that the user experience of all of these different pieces and things that the city of Kansas City does has a singular, beautiful, expected experience from the people in the city. It's their focus on that beautification is also like a moving into that. How do we activate people moving through the city? An example is their wayfinding.
It's got to be staggered. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's got to be staggered. But the wayfinding, the signage is consistent, though this isn't like a new concept of what someone might expect out of the city. Like you'd expect all of the signs to look the same, but to have an aesthetically pleasing, consistent brand coming out of that city.
If you came from a city that already had consistency and branding and stuff, that would be what you would expect in Kansas. Right. That would be base level expectation, is what you're saying.
Right, but it's interesting that that's where they're starting. So it's using true. And leveraging that wayfinding methodology to really showcase this is how all of these departments can work together to have a singular external perspective. They are one body, and that UX piece, maybe that's me putting my tech lens on, I think is something that's very unique to how they're approaching everything in the city, from infrastructure pieces to the trash that they mentioned, right? It's how are we creating something beautiful that people can experience and recognize that really it's their tax dollars work. And I think Melissa talking about how her primary responsibility is to the taxpayers, and she's not going to have 3 different departments work on a recycling program and spend all those separate budgets when you can just put them together, either do something bigger or save money to do more. And I think that's...
Yeah, exactly. And when you have that infrastructure piece squared away, then you can add the next stone to the wall, which is the activation of the infrastructure pieces, where you take the beautiful infrastructure and rather than it just being utilitarian in that, like it helps you find your way, it actually gives you an experience. And so the physical part is one half of the experience, and then the stories that you tell around it, how you get them to move through those spaces, like we talked about in the previous episode with activating those locations, like that's how you make them memorable, is by turning them into being experiential rather than just functional, and the beauty side of things is the first step to that. And the activations of the things is the next step. You do want to slightly build in tandem.
Well, and I think that that's something that Melissa brought from her experience in New York.
New York is one of those spaces, right, where it's always had this, there's a lot of like beautiful, like little tiny details. You go through the subway areas and there are these gorgeous little like brass sculptures. And so it's always had that kind of a cohesiveness to it in infrastructure. Not always, but it's been there for long enough that they've gotten their shit together. But they still had vacancies after the pandemic, right? So it's why it's still valuable to remember that infrastructure is one thing, and like the physical and the beauty and the joy in the physical is one thing, but like just making sure that you create memories in those spaces as well. And it takes beautification, and it takes things like Story City and events and whatnot to build the memory in that space. So it's physical as well as mental.
All of these cities are different parts of their journey. They can't do all of it at once. That'd be impossible. No, but they really want to build.
They've got to brainwash everyone first, right, Melissa?
That or come in and be like, no.
Yeah, but I think that this is why I say that they are like on the right, like expressway pass to the right place, is because that this focus on joy, like this whole episode, this focus on joy, that's something that we viscerally see at Story City, is that we focus on joy and entertainment and gamification because it builds positive memories. It's not just a cool statue over there. It's over there, I typed a code and shot off a rocket, or I fought a dragon, right? Like where you're taking joy and entertainment and you're using for that purpose of building memory.
Yeah, and I think that the way that Melissa is going about this in the city of Kansas City is really fascinating. I'll coin the term, it's a Melissatocracy that's going on in Kansas City. She can come after me later, but I think that the collaboration of all of those pieces that you're just discussing are really being trained into those city departments from the top down. I think there's, in that environment, they have such support from everybody in all those departments and that leadership support, versus some cities don't have that environment where they get that top-down support. They have to go grassroots, bottom up, and try to figure out collaboration. And I don't know, does it matter? There's a question maybe. Does it matter if that support is top-down or bottom up if you're in a Melissatocracy or a grassroots movement?
I mean, I think that the political landscape recently has shown us that we are not a homogenous set of beings across a single country, let alone across the world. And so I think that it doesn't matter if it comes from the top down or the bottom up, like whatever culture-wise works to get the job done. And I think, and that's why I think that it's wonderful that we're going from this episode where you've gone from the top down to, in our next episode, we are speaking collaboration that is built from the roots of the city up. So they are leveraging what they have and the assets that they have to create this cohesive plan, this bottom-up building of structures and integration and these intentional collaboration efforts across its groups in this grassroots style. And they know that everyone doesn't believe the same thing, even just in a city, let alone in a country, right? And so they're leaning in to bridge those differences. And so the next city that we are speaking to is Baltimore City. And even though they are less further in, I suppose, implementation, they are taking things to the next level in terms of collaboration. And so leveraging this collaborative spirit to bridge community enclaves, such as nighttime graffiti tagging community, and taking them and plugging them into the city. The city desires to make this space feel safe and welcoming for everyone. So I'm so excited to take us next week to the city of Baltimore, where we're going to chat, plugging in creativity from the ground up to complement this episode about the top down.
And I think that it's really fascinating to take a look at both of these perspectives. And it has been really fun to spend the last couple of weeks in Kansas City to really dive into the fullness of what that collaborative environment looks like. And then to be able to take next week's episode and delve into, or the next couple of weeks episodes rather, wink, wink, to delve into what that other collaborative community can look like and to really do a cross comparison.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Kansas City, for being so welcoming,
and amazing,
open-hearted, heart of the country. We felt it so much in our conversations with you guys. We are so excited to see what happens in the future with you.
Yeah. We can't wait to look forward to 2026.
Exactly. Ciao, everyone. Until then, have a great adventure.
The Vibrant Spaces podcast is produced by Story City. You can find our entire archive on any podcasting app and on about.storycity.app, where we publish transcripts and show notes. This episode was produced by Tim Souza, and our staff includes Justin Kahn, Brett Ludwig, and Victoria Omitska. Our theme song is Happy Indie by Alex Guz. Our co-hosts are Tim Souza and me, Emily Craven. As always, thank you for listening. We hope you have a glorious adventure this week.